May 2018. Alone at 7,400 meters on Everest's deadliest ridge, Nobukazu Kuriki types a calm message. He's going higher. The world sees a determined climber. What no one realizes is that Kuriki is already dead. He just doesn't know it yet. After 7 failed ascents, the loss of 9 fingers, and a lifetime shaped by obsession with solitude, Kuriki is on his final push, defying storms and thin air without oxygen or help. The stakes are fatal, the outcome sealed before dawn breaks. How did a quiet student from Hokkaido become the Everest climber, whose greatest triumph hid his end? This is where his story truly begins. Hokkaido in winter is a world of silence and snow. For Nobukazu Kuriki, born there in 1982, that silence was never empty. Childhood meant long months of white fields, biting wind, and the steady hush that settles over northern Japan when the sun slips behind clouds. By the time he reached university, Kuriki had already learned to move quietly through the cold. He joined the Hokkaido University Mountaineering Club, drawn less by competition and more by the promise of stillness. Most members climbed in teams, sharing jokes and tea in crowded tents. Kuriki preferred the hours before sunrise, setting out alone, breaking trail through drifts while the world was dark. Club records and early photos show a young man wrapped in layers, face half hidden by a scarf, always standing a little apart from the group. Friends recall that he rarely spoke of goals or records. Instead, he talked about the way the snow muffled sound, the strange comfort of being the only one awake on the mountain. For Kuriki, climbing was never about the summit. It was about the conversation he could have with himself when nobody else was listening. This quiet pursuit shaped everything that followed. The lessons of Hokkaido, patience, self-reliance, and an almost meditative acceptance of hardship, became his foundation. Others measured risk by speed or numbers. Kuriki measured it by how honestly he could face the mountain and how much solitude he could carry. Even as a student, he was already practicing the kind of climbing that would define his life: pure, pared down, and deeply alone. In the autumn of 2009, Nobukazu Kuriki stood alone at the foot of Mount Everest's north face. The Tibetan plateau stretched out behind him, wind slicing through camp, carrying the promise of winter. He had no Sherpa team, no bottled oxygen, and no crowd of climbers waiting for a weather window. Just a small tent, a battered diary, and the weight of his own ambition. For Kuriki, this was the true Everest: empty, cold, and honest. His plan was simple: move fast and light, trusting in his experience from Hokkaido's mountains. But Everest's north side is notorious for its exposure. By late September, the jet stream had already begun to shift, bringing gusts that rattled tents and stripped snow from the slopes. Meteorological archives from that week show wind speeds topping 60 kilometers per hour and temperatures plunging well below -20 degrees Celsius. Each morning, Kuriki checked his thermometer and watched frost creep across his gear. The mountain was silent, except for the howl of wind. Day after day, he pushed higher, carrying only what he could manage. Above 7,000 meters, the air thinned to a whisper. Breathing became work. He wrote in his diary about the loneliness, about how the mountain seemed to swallow every sound. On the 4th day, a storm front rolled in, turning the sky white and erasing any hope of progress. There was no debate. He packed his gear and retreated, battered but alive. For Kuriki, this was not failure. It was a beginning. Everest had shown him its teeth, and he had learned to listen. The mountain would wait, so would he. The wind at 8,300 meters cuts through everything: down, Gore-Tex, even bone. In autumn 2012, high above the Khumbu icefall, Nobukazu Kuriki waits out a storm that refuses to end. The tent rattles like a trapped animal. Snow piles against the fabric until the world outside is just a white blur, and the air inside grows colder by the hour. For 2 days and nights, he barely moves. The altimeter reads numbers most people never see awake. Oxygen thins with each breath. Fingers and toes lose feeling, then color, then sensation altogether. Kuriki scribbles notes in a diary with hands that are already going numb. Outside, the storm howls, and the silence inside the tent grows heavier. By the time the clouds finally break, escape feels almost impossible. Kuriki tries to move, but his hands are stiff, unresponsive. He manages to radio for help. A rescue helicopter, rare at this altitude, arrives after hours of waiting, the rotors barely lifting in the thin air. He is flown down to Kathmandu, silent and bundled in layers, frostbite already spreading beneath the bandages. Doctors at the hospital make the call. 9 fingers must go. The amputations are swift, clinical. In the days that follow, Kuriki learns to eat right and button a shirt all over again. Everest has taken something permanent. The mountain's lesson is written in scars, and the cost is stamped into every remaining movement of his hands. 3 years after the amputations, Kuriki's hands looked nothing like a climber's. Where most would see limits, he saw a new challenge: to relearn every movement, every grip, every knot from scratch. His right thumb, the only finger spared by frostbite, became the anchor for everything, clipping carabiners, cinching harness straps, even zipping up his jacket in the cold. Dr. Kenichi Murakami, a prosthetics specialist from Sapporo, watched Kuriki's early rehab sessions and realized that standard solutions wouldn't work. Instead of prosthetic fingers, they experimented with thicker axe handles, custom tape wraps, and gloves sewn to fit each stump. Simple tasks became hours of practice. Kuriki learned to tie figure-8 knots using only his thumb and palm, tugging rope between his teeth when needed. For ice axes, he trained with wrist leashes and friction tape, building up the strength to swing and plant tools without the leverage of fingers. Video clips from this period show him straining, sweat beading on his brow, as he hoists himself up training walls and snowy slopes around Hokkaido. Each adaptation was tested in the field, first on low mountains, then on technical climbs in Japan, always alone. By 2013, Kuriki was back in the Himalayas. He attempted Everest 4 more times over the next 5 years, each climb solo, each one without bottled oxygen. None of these ended at the summit, but each returned him to the place he felt most himself, high on the mountain, moving quietly, trusting in methods he'd built from the ground up. The west ridge of Everest has a reputation that even seasoned climbers respect. Unlike the crowded southeast ridge, this line is exposed, unpredictable, and known for sudden avalanches and collapsing seracs, those towering blocks of ice that can shatter without warning. In the spring of 2018, the mountain was especially restless. Meteorological bulletins warned of unstable snow bridges and a major icefall collapse near Camp 2, just days before Kuriki's ascent. 3 climbers died on Everest that season, 2 from falls, 1 from exhaustion. The odds were not in anyone's favor, and the West Ridge saw fewer attempts than any year in the last decade. Every step above 7,000 meters meant gambling with the mountain's mood, and this year, the mountain wasn't patient. On the night of May 20th, Kuriki pitched his tent at 7,400 meters, high above the last safe camp. The wind battered the fabric, rattling the thin poles, while the temperature outside dropped below minus 30 degrees Celsius. His last message, sent just before midnight, was brief: "I want to go a little higher." After that, nothing. Radio calls from base camp echoed unanswered through the darkness. Hours slipped by with no movement on the GPS, no flicker of a headlamp against the snow. When the search team reached his tent the next morning, they found him still inside his sleeping bag, unmoving. The silence was absolute. Alone on the mountain, Kuriki's journey had ended in the place where ambition and exhaustion finally became indistinguishable from sleep. In May 2018, Nobukazu Kuriki posted his last message from 7,400 meters on the west ridge of Everest, his 8th attempt in 9 years. Over a decade, he lost 9 fingers, survived multiple storms, and refused oxygen or assistance, driven by a belief in solitary, pure climbing. Medical records and archived expedition logs confirm his resilience and innovations after injury, while his own videos show the stark realities of isolation at altitude. Yet key details of his final hours, such as precise GPS data and full radio logs, remain unavailable or unverified. Kuriki's story is now part of Everest's documented history of ambition and loss. Today, solo attempts without oxygen remain as deadly as ever, with fatality rates among the highest on the mountain. Kuriki's legacy is not just in his persistence, but in the risks he accepted, documented, measured, and ultimately fatal. Mount Everest keeps its silence. What drove him onward is recorded, but the final moments remain known only to the mountain.